Welcome to 15 minutes of Pharma. So let me begin with a scene. It's late in the evening, the COO is still in the office. Now the portfolio is cleaner now, the factory is more stable, the business is beginning to breathe again, but the hardest question is still sitting on the desk. New CDMO opportunities, pressure to grow, teams asking what comes next, and potential investors beginning to pay attention. And the CEO knows one thing. If growth comes back in the wrong form, the company may recreate the very complexity it has just worked so hard to remove. So, Manuel, let me start there. If you were the CEO, how would you restart growth without reopening, let's say, the whole wounds of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great way to start our part two of episode 13. So I think that the first thing I would say is this, well, once the house has been put in order, the next phase is not about returning to volume. It's about deciding what kind of growth the company can now support without losing coherence again. You know, there's a saying that I think that somehow illustrates very well what should be the mindset at this stage of the turnaround, which is, vanity, volume is vanity, profit is sanity. And I think that this really encapsulates very well the what we should be pursuing in the phase two, as we have defined it, of a turnaround. And this, Carlos, because the goal is not to fill the factory again. It's about deciding what kind of growth a company can now support without losing coherence again. And this means refill the plant with better economics.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that is exactly where we pick up from, let's say, part one. So, in the previous episode, we talked about facing the truth. So, cleaning up the portfolio, right sizing without destroying capability, and rationalizing the plant and the operating system. So, today we move into the next stage of the turnaround, how to rebuild growth, how to restore momentum, and only then how to bring in the right capital partner. So, Manuel, let's go there. Once the house has been put in order, where does credible growth actually come from?
Yeah, it's obviously a great and critical question to be asked, Carlos. So I would say that growth cannot simply mean more of the same. So if I were the CEO, Carlos, I would not want to refill the factory with any volume available. I would want to refill it with better economics, and this means, Carlos, developing adjacent CDMO areas that fit the company's real technical and equipment base. It means building business development deliberately, not opportunistically. And this means looking for multi-year partnerships that bring stability and predictability. And also, it means creating a commercial pipeline that matches the industrial logic of the site instead of fighting it. So, again, the goal is not to fill the factory again, is to refill it with better work, better contracts, and well, more credible value creation.
So what you're saying is that this business development is not just about winning projects. So it's about winning the right project. Yeah.
Exactly, Carlos. Very well said. And that is where the earlier portfolio work matters, because if you haven't, clarified what the factory should stop doing, you will never be clear about what it should now try to win. So the commercial future has to be built on top of economic truth, not in parallel with it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that bad growth is really the risk here. So because the company has already done the hard part of regaining coherence,
Precisely,
and yeah,
Carlos,
yeah.
and I would say I would humbly say that this is something many turnarounds get wrong, you know, because once the organization starts to recover, the temptation is to celebrate new volume too early. But bad growth is how industrial drift returns. So if the new work brings the wrong economics, the wrong customer behavior, or the wrong operational burden, the system starts to accumulate noise again. So, Carlos, if I were the CEO, I would be asking, a couple of questions that could help the CEO and the team to really select, the right growth and the right projects for the company. Questions such as, does this opportunity fit our capability base? Does it improve the quality of our portfolio? Does it bring stability? Does it strengthen the future position of the site? These are simple questions, but they can be very helpful and revealing because, the goal is not activity, is better activity instead.
Great. Okay. So now let me ask about something that is often underestimated in these situations: culture. Because companies like these often carry fatigue. So people are working hard, but not always believing. What does the CEO have to do there?
That's a very, very important point, Carlos. It's natural that after years of drift, of pressure, ambiguity, many organizations enter a kind of, a survival mode. People just keep going, but they stop believing that the system will really improve. So, the CEO's role is not only to rationalize, it's also to restore seriousness, direction, and well, then the possibility of winning again. And in my view, that is where culture becomes very concrete. People do not go the extra mile for ambiguity. They go the extra mile when they can see that there are clear priorities, real decisions, visible progress, and that there are leaders who are serious, really serious about the future. So if I were the CEO, I would want to rebuild a culture of ownership, of problem solving, of truth and disciplined ambition, not motivational theater at all,
Mhm.
but operational confidence instead.
Yeah, not motivational theater. Yeah, good. So the message is not work harder, it's more work in a system that deserves commitment.
Exactly, Carlos. And I believe people will respond when they feel that the organization is becoming more truthful, more coherent, and more capable of winning again. And that is when you begin to see the shift, from fatigue to ownership, from pure firefighting or constant firefighting to progress, and and from defensive behavior to constructive energy. And for me that matters enormously because Carlos, a turnaround is not sustainable if it only changes the numbers. It has to change the internal energy of the business.
Okay. So in a way, part one was about restoring structure, and now part two is also about restoring belief, let's say.
Yes, Carl, I think that's a very good way to put it. Part one is about stopping the drift. Part two is about creating the conditions for believable growth. And that requires not only a cleaner portfolio and a more coherent plan. It also requires people who feel that business now deserves their best effort.
Okay. So, Manuel, let me now bring private equity back into the conversation. So, but that in a different moment, or I think now it's the right moment, because many people instinctively start there. Where does it actually fit? So, the private equity.
Well, for me, Carlos, private equity comes after the company has become believable again. You know, as far as I can tell, the company must first face the truth, and then redesign the portfolio, rebuild the operating system, restore economic coherence, and create more credible growth. And only then does the company become attractive to the right capital partner. So someone that can really understand the business, the company, and that has really an overall plan for the investments that or the investments that they are looking for. So, in my view, and at this stage, so private equity will become, a strategic investor rather than an opportunistic
Optimistic.
investor.
Mm, mm.
So I would put it like this: private equity is not the turnaround. Private equity, at best, it funds and accelerates a turnaround that management has already made credible. So the right private equity partner does not rescue the story. It accelerates a story that the CEO and the organization have already begun to make investable.
So that's a very good distinction. So if we go back to that CAO in the office, looking at growth options, team fatigue, and incoming investor interest, so the real question is not how fast can we scale. It's more like how do we grow without losing coherence again? No.
Precisely, Carlos.
Mm, mm.
And it's a very good point because, once industrial coherence has been built, the real job of the CEO is to protect it while converting it into growth. And that means refilling the factory with better economics, rebuilding, cultural momentum, and only then bringing in the capital partner who can accelerate the next phase. So if I were the CEO, I would not start by asking how to grow. I would start by asking what kind of growth a company can now sustain without drifting again. Because, turnaround is not only about stopping decline, it's about building a business that deserves to grow.
Yeah, okay. Building a business that deserves to grow. That is a very strong place to end. So, Manuel, thank you. And thank you to all of you for listening to 15 Minutes of Pharma. So, today, in part two of episode 13 of This is uh, um, If I Were the CEO conversation, we explored what comes after the cleanup phase of a turnaround. So, how to refill the factory with better economics, rebuild commitment and momentum inside the organization, and only then make the company attractive to the right capital partner. So, see you in the next episode. Bye,
Thank you,
Manuel.
Carlos. Bye bye. Thank you very much.